Welcome CSE 235, Advanced Web Applications. This is ex3. Now if you're saying, where's ex2? ex2, we're going to do some basic stuff, but I just wanted to show you ex3, what we're going to be working towards. This is a finished product, and it's not finished yet. It's just going to be something that we're going to build in a couple steps, and it's basically a form. And we're going to obviously have to work on the form first in HTML, then we're going to have to style it, then we're going to work with JavaScript. And we're going to be working with JavaScript on the front end, because what typically happens when you fill out a form, and let's just look at our form here, we have labels on this side, we have input fields, we have a select drop-down menu here, we have an input field, and then we have a button. What typically will happen is we will send data to a server. And usually there'll be a processing language or script that will do that, like CGI, PHP, or something on the server side that will process that information and typically put it in a database. That's usually what happens when you fill out a form or fill out something online. You make a transaction, it goes into a database somewhere, it checks for passwords, whatever it may be. But we're just going to focus on the front end right now. And that'll be enough just to get started, even just to format this. Now this could easily be set up with a table by using two columns. Here's a column here, here's a column here, and then doing rows. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 rows, 2 columns. That would be easy enough to set up using a table. Now a lot of people don't use tables anymore, and part of the issue with tables is that they're hard to kind of reconfigure because they're not really responsive. Now they're responsive in the sense that they can get smaller and cells can get smaller. You can see what happens here. It gets responsive, it jumps when there's a lot of margin, and then it changes, there's less margin, and then eventually, I'll just show you this, I'll inspect this and I'll put it in this mode like on a phone. And keep in mind that when you do this in your inspect, you could put it here to responsive, you could put it on a certain phone choice to look at, or you could just keep dragging this over and you can see what happens eventually. Eventually, this will go to one column here, and I think at the last minute I had made that right aligned, so I would have to flip that around so that's left aligned. But what I'm pointing out is that when it gets on a phone, it would have to be a single column. We wouldn't do it so that it's going across like that. Now, I'd have to also change that alignment. That's something, like I said, I did at the last minute just to make it look better, because I think I originally had this stuff aligned over here and then I switched it around. It looked better like that, but I didn't even think about the responsive aspect of it being over there, which doesn't look very good. But anyway, that's easier to do when we don't have a table, when we actually have these set up as divs, and that's what we're going to probably do. And there's different ways to do it. You could do it with Flex. That can get a little complicated, but we'll probably do it with divs to start in CSS. So there's the HTML and knowing how to set that up. Then there's the CSS. Then there's the JavaScript. And what's the JavaScript going to do? Well, first of all, if you just submit this thing, I'm getting a required field. Now that's part of HTML, so I could put in my name here. Now if I submit it, I'm getting an alert window, and that's JavaScript doing that. And I'll put in my last name. And now if I keep going, I'll just keep going right now because I didn't put in validation for every field. So I'll put 123 Main Street, and I don't need a number unless you need an apartment number, and I'll just put Allentown, and then I'll choose PA, and I'll just put in a zip code 18104, and then I'll hit submit. And what's happening here, very basic, it's just writing it to a page. Now, it's not writing it to a database because we don't have that ability to do yet, especially even through Replit. But right now, even to send it to another page, we would need to store it as local storage with JavaScript, and we're not doing that yet. We're just writing it to a page. So we're just taking information, writing it to a page. So that'll be our ex3 that we'll do after we explore a little JavaScript. But before we do that, I'm going to show you just a little bit about JavaScript, some of the ways we can output JavaScript and write it using console log, using inner HTML. This is using inner HTML. We've used that before in CSE 103 and CSE 230, changing things in the DOM, changing pictures, changing Patrick, just doing different stuff like that. But this gets a little more complex because we're working with a form, and we're not going to submit the form so we could validate the form before it gets sent. We're still going to work with JavaScript in a separate file so that we can just call it in our index file. So we could just put it in here, and typically it's put at the end so that everything else loads first. So we can just link to a script. And you could call it whatever you want, but this is just by default script.js. So we could link to all the information in the file here. So here's our JavaScript in that file. That way we don't have to write this all to a page, just like our CSS. We don't have to put all this CSS in our index page. This will just be set up to make our buttons look good. So this is all the information from the button. So we're going to work on all this, but again, we're going to talk about outputting to the console. If you've never wrote to the console in Replit, we'll do that. We'll talk about writing with inner HTML and actually putting things on a page. So we'll do some of that first with ex2, very basic kind of stuff, but that's what we're going to do for ex3. So I just wanted to kind of give you a little preview of that, and we'll be working on that next. So I'm still recording videos for all of this as we work through it and as I troubleshoot some things as well. So stay tuned for some basic JavaScript coming up.